Timothy Aaron Stiles, I'm your moderator. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. This is my first year being involved with the festival. I hear it's a wonderful festival, and on their behalf, thank you for coming out. Being that we have a small audience, tell me your name. Pat? Sandwich Man? Jacob. Jacob? Okay. Okay, and it's Andre back there. Andre Lamont, he will be moderating a couple of other panels and later on, and might be serving as one of the panelists. So now what we're going to do, I'm here because a little bit about me. You can IMDb me, Timothy Aaron Stiles. Went to Georgia State Film School. Before that, worked in the business. I majored in screenwriting, concentrating in screenwriting and film theory. There's one screenplay that I co-wrote called Akawaba. It's about, and hopefully when they raise the money, they'll shoot it in Ghana. Let's see, what else? When I was in film school, I'm going to tell you an interesting story real quick just to warm up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Had one film professor who told me in 1995 I had written a short screenplay and my character was addicted to heroin, and he told me, you know, heroin is passé. Nobody gets addicted to heroin anymore. So he named the drug of the day, and I told him no, I wanted my character to be addicted to heroin. So 20-something years later, heroin is the new drug. So as writers, don't let anybody dissuade you from creating your piece, right? All right. So another screenplay, Dances Mercedes Do, was being shopped around New York and LA in 1995. Wasn't picked up at the time. I had an agent, Kevin McShane, at Fifi Oscard. At that time, I had a friend working for Simon & Schuster who told me that she was interested in possibly novelizing it. And I told her at that time I didn't have a novel in me. I just couldn't write a novel. So 20-plus years later, I'm now trying to novelize that screenplay to see whether or not I can get somebody interested. So that's a little bit about me. More importantly, let us now meet the two expert panelists, and we may have more joining us momentarily. Start first here.
All right, I'm Kevin Powers. I'm the program director for this event, but I'm also mostly a screenwriter and producer. I've produced one of my own features called House of Secrets. I stopped for a little bit because we've changed the title so many times I sometimes forget, which went through a lot of rewrites. And then I'm actually in the process or pre-production with a web series that I wrote for Infectious Films, and they're also producing my feature. So I have those coming up soon. But I've written probably 10 to 15 shorts that have been produced and produced other people's scripts, so I know a lot about having to work with writers to rewrite their stuff and having my own stuff rewritten by other people.
Okay. Steve Sherwood. I'm mostly a writer-director. I had a film premiere here yesterday, The King's Guitar. That's my fourth short. My last short got into 10 festivals, got 4 awards. I was trained in the Navy as a journalist and then took film courses at USC San Diego and American Film Institute. Right now I run the Blank Page Screenwriters Workshop, which meets the first and third Tuesday of every month. We're back at our clubhouse now because for some reason the Irish bar was just too noisy, so you can figure that. We read 30 pages from different screenplays, 2 different screenplays or 30 pages in a short. And so it takes 3 meetings to read 1 feature, hopefully. But the thing is, we've had several shorts that have been produced through there, and 1 feature, Morningside Monster, came through us.
Yeah.
So as writers, the first thing you need is feedback, and that's what this is great for, because we have professional actors coming in that read the parts. You get to hear them read. You have other writers, directors, producers who can give you feedback. And that's pretty much my background.
All right. Okay. Just to properly contextualize everything, That's not important. Let's talk. I've interviewed a lot of people in my life and some famous people, and so this is going to be fun. It's going to be real loose and real conversational. So before we talk about the rewriting process, let's talk about what your process is like for that first draft.
Okay. Unfortunately, I come from a writing background. So I say unfortunately because I have about an average of 10 to 15 different ideas in my head at one given time. And a lot of the times, they are gestating in there for years before I actually get the inspiration to sit down and write them out. Now, my process is always doing a 10 to 15 page treatment of my ideals so I can get it out on paper. I may not write a script for another year or two, but I have the ideal down so that over the course of a year or two, I am actually fine-tuning it. Now, that works for my own personal projects. One of the not the web series, but the feature that I wrote that's being produced, it was a commissioned piece. The actors came to me and they said they wanted to take a short film and make it into a feature. So I generally took their ideal and expanded upon it. And that's a completely different process than writing my own stuff because I had to literally write that in, I think, 4 weeks. So to take a short film into a feature in 4 weeks was a different type of process than my own stuff.
This is the thing about writers is that everybody's got a different process, and you just have to go with what works for you. Because after I took those courses in Southern California, and I started, because I've been writing nonfiction, tried writing my first screenplay, I had minor characters start taking over the plot, and it freaked me out. Because I'm writing, and it was like being possessed, because it's like, what the hell, where are you going? And I felt like I lost control of it. So it took years later to join this group in peer pressure, because after 3 meetings, it's like, where's your stuff? And now I can't turn the damn thing off, because the muse, since then, that was 5 years ago, I've written a 3-part miniseries, 240 pages, 3 features, about 10 shorts, 4 of which have been produced. Mm-hmm. But because I have a lot of writing background, like Kevin, I have all these ideas, except I'm not as structured as he is. I'll start with a scene because I can't get it out of my head, and I'll just start writing it out. I don't even know where it's going. On the 260-page script, which, by the way, an agent told me, never tell anyone you wrote a 260-page script. That's why it's a trilogy.
And don't try and read it like I did, I guess.
Well, Kevin had great feedback when he eventually made it through it. He just wants to kill off people. So, but anyway, it's the process for me is a little different. But I like him. I gestate, and then I'll sit down like I've thought about something for a few weeks, and I'll sit down in the morning and write 30 pages, and it's done. Yeah. But there are no Mozarts in screenwriting. No one writes a perfect screenplay first draft out ever. And the worst thing you can do, when we've seen it, is where somebody gets an idea, they write it down, they just go shoot it. They don't have anybody read it, they don't get any feedback, then they're defensive and embarrassed. And it's like, well. So as a writer, you've got to be able to take those slings and arrows of other people, or you shouldn't be doing it, because you're not working in a vacuum, because all that audience is not a vacuum. They're going to tell you honestly what they think. So anyway, that's my basic process. I try to go through it. I take it. The first thing I do, I take my first drafts to the blank page screenwriters workshop, and usually about half of it's useful, half of it isn't, because people tend to try to rewrite your screenplay into their version of it, which is reconstructive. But the thing is, you'll get feedback, you'll hear things when the actors read it you won't catch reading it yourself. And you'll have other people say, well, what about this? And every script I've had go through there, I've made some changes based on feedback every time. I don't know if that's been the case with you.
Yes, most definitely. There's been, I'd say I probably take at least 25% of the feedback, at least, which is a good amount considering that, you know, I think we have an average of 10 to 15 people each time, at least. And then getting those ideals from 10 to 15 peers, screenwriters, as well as actors who will eventually perform that is instrumental to the rewriting process. Because
okay, now I'm going to stop you. Now, I mentioned before that I've interviewed a lot of people, so now I'm going to be hard on you. Okay, so I want you to stick to the question so that you don't wind up answering 20 of my questions, okay? All right.
You got it.
Okay, so now let's go back, Kevin. Well, before we come back to pick up on one thing that you said. Now, as you're writing, do you revise as you're writing, or do you finish the 30 pages, 40 pages, 50, and then start the revision process, or do you revise as you write?
Starting from my original treatment, my script will always start the way my treatment started. Okay. It will change as I am writing it, because then I'm getting the voice of the characters. I don't necessarily have the voice of the characters when I'm writing a treatment, because I'm not putting any dialogue in the treatment. Once I get the voice of the characters as I'm writing it, I'm figuring out the themes, I'm figuring out the motifs that I'm sticking in there, visual motifs, stuff like that. That all comes as I'm writing the screenplay. And then I don't change what I've already written until I go back for my first rewrite, which I don't show anyone my rough draft, by the way. I might do three different rough drafts before I finally bring my script to the screenwriting group, because I know that I may not develop my motifs or my visual motifs or my themes until halfway in the script. So I need to link all those up at the beginning of the script so that it actually seems cohesive. So.
What's the question?
As you're writing the first draft, again, we're going to get to it. As you're writing that first draft.
There's what I call scene syndrome, which is, and we have writers, and we've all met them, that how long have you been working on the screenplay? Just a couple years. And it's like, how far are you? I'm just about done. It's like, dude, right. You know, there's a tendency to do a scene and go, you know, don't do it. Don't look back. You'll turn to salt. Don't go back until you get the thing out, because that's the hard lesson I learned. Because I had screenplays, I had one act in, and I never got past that because I kept going back trying to fix it. It's like, you don't know where you're going yet. Get to the end of the story, and it's a huge accomplishment, and you'll feel better once you've gotten to fade out. So I'll do the 30-page. I just want to get it out of my head, because it's kind of a muse. It's like a headache. It's like you have to write this down now, and it's like, all right. So you get it down. Now you can go back and take your time.
Okay. Now, do you use paper and pen, or do you use computer?
I actually use both.
You use both? Okay.
I'm very bad. Because there's so many different ideas floating in my head. About 80% of the time when I'm writing a short film, it will be on paper, because it's something I can just take with me everywhere. Now that I have myself a little iPad, it makes it a little easier to use that. But before, I was writing all my short films that way. A feature, I always did on the computer, because I'd hate to go back and retype it. Right. Okay. Short film is a lot easier to do that. Features, yeah, not so easy. So.
My handwriting's so bad I can't write anything and still read it. So it's, you know, I'll go back later and it's like, what the hell is that? I don't know. So I have to use a computer. And with Final Draft Writer for iPad, I mean, one of the things I do is video playback on sets. It's like Let's Be Cops, Necessary Roughness, those kind of things. And you know how it is on an actual set, is that most of the time for guys that do this kind of specific thing, most of the day is waiting. And then it's like, it better be great, and I need it right now. So I actually wrote a short screenplay sitting on the set using Final Draft Writer on an iPad. Because you want an inspiration, you're on a set. How much more inspiration do you need?
Yeah.
Do you use Final Draft Writer?
Yeah.
Do you use
have used it. I've used several different programs. I'm trying to get back into using Final Draft since everyone else uses it. Okay. But one of the things about the blank page screenwriter group is that we want everyone to be using at least a type A writing program. Because, you know, the first couple of years, we had like stuff on Word and every other wrong formatted thing out there.
Yeah, I don't. If they send it, I make them send it to me first. If it's in Word, it's like, no, I'm not scheduling this, because you got to put it in the right format. Don't, you know, Final Draft is what everybody uses. So you can get it for like $180, and you know,
and cheaper a lot of the times now. That's always on sale. So
now, is your first draft revision your second draft?
It might be the third or fourth one by the time I get that, yeah.
Do you understand that question? Do you all understand the question? That you write, you get it out of your head, and it's on paper. when you do the revisions, is that your official first rewrite, or is it just a revised first draft?
My first draft isn't until I show it at the other writers. The first time the first draft I give to other people to give me critiques on is my first draft. Everything I do before that is nothing. It's just me rewriting it until I get to a point where I want other people to read it.
Well, take a little different tack. First draft is get it on my head, and from then on it's the official versions because I want to move on with it. And I take it to the meetings because I don't want to have a flaw early on that I don't really see because, you know, you can't see it because it's right in front of your face, and find out that I really need to change something major when I've done 4 versions of it. I'd rather just take the raw stuff and go, there's a big error right there. It's like, oh, crap, all right, I'll fix that. Because now I haven't invested as much time. But I don't know, maybe I'm not as secure in my first draft.
What are the things that usually block your creative process? Are there set things? Are there distractions that take you away from being a disciplined writer? Are they things that are the same, or are they new things depending on the project?
I'm always writing. I write blogs, I write film reviews, I write all the time. So the biggest thing for me is when I stray too far away from my treatment and I lose track of what my story is. I got maybe 2 scripts that I have not finished because I strayed too much from my treatment and I've lost touch with where my characters should be going. And that does happen sometimes. I hate for that to happen, but I don't know how to get back on track. So they may sit on my shelf for a long time. I think one of them's been on my shelf for like 6 years. I'm still trying to figure out how to fix it, but I don't know how to. And if I, used his idea and like said, have other people read it first, maybe they can tell me how to fix it. That might actually help me finish those 2 scripts. But since I've never done that, I'm a little afraid of letting audiences read my really, really rough draft. But that's usually the biggest thing is if I stray too far from my treatment, that I lose touch with my characters.
I try to write stream of consciousness because I'm just letting the muse kind of take over and spit it out. And my biggest problem is restructuring to make it a little more formulaic to fit what people's expectations are of how, this should happen in this action, this should happen in that. Because I tried reading Save the Cat and I hated it. I got 20 pages in and threw the book away. I cannot write, because his whole thing is by page 9, by page 9 this should happen, page 10 this should happen. It's very specific and I just can't force my muse into that. But everybody, you have to write the way that works for you. So I write the first draft out, then I try to put it into the proper format if things are a little out of order.
So writing stream of consciousness, you don't experience creative blocks? You're able to just flow and...
Oh, I wouldn't say that. No, I think my biggest frustration is the way I write. I'll get scenes in my mind and it's like, well, how do I turn that into a movie? And then you're like, well, I've got the seed of a good idea, but how do I, and then of course life gets in the way. I tend to write in spurts. I don't write all the time like Kevin. So because I do a lot of editing, video editing, not writing and, then it's just forcing yourself, I've got to get it out and sitting down and going through it. But once I start, I like to just, it's like an edit session. Once you start, you really want to get through it. Because if you're interrupted, that thought process derails and it's not easy.
So, okay, so stream of consciousness then. So how does that work with the rewriting? So when you're writing that first draft, stream of consciousness, you're flowing, the muses are inspiring you. Then you go back to do a rewrite. Is it stream of consciousness again? Because it seems to me you're writing forever.
Yeah, that's when you have to say, shut up and let me fix it. So, because that, you've got the basic idea down. And that's where it's so important to get feedback from other people because, they'll pick out something, oh, that's a good idea, I need to incorporate it. But how do I incorporate that? And I did one quick rewrite based on some feedback, but I did a quick rewrite of I've got a feature called Quantum Soul. And it's about a physicist that develops teleportation to cure cancer. So it's a completely different take on it. And the problem is that I got some feedback, and I tried to just stick the feedback in, like I gave the protagonist cancer, so it made it more ironic, and then a follow-up on it. So I sent it to a screenplay competition who said, what happened? You didn't do anything else with it. You just said, laid it out there and waited till the end. It's like, and we all hate when we get caught out, you know, like, they see something that you know, and you're just like, don't look at the man behind the curtain. But that's why the feedback is great, because they tell you, you didn't fix that.
Just something you added in and then actually follow through with.
Well, that's the thing. It's like my antagonist wasn't in enough of the movie that they felt sorry for them at the end instead of feeling like they were bad. So it's making myself go back and rewrite things that are going to have such a domino effect that you're going to have to go through every word.
Okay, now let's go back to the brief story I told. There's a method to my madness. The professor who told me that I should not use heroin as the drug choice. At what point is feedback good? At what point is feedback not good? Workshops, okay. Different film professor in class having to write a screenplay. I suffered the first time I took the class because I am one of those people who don't like to allow people to read my stuff. Not because, and I want to come back to another question about why don't you like to do it in that rough draft. But I had legal problems, and my issue was somebody's going to steal my idea.
Oh.
And so the question is, one, at what point do you not look for feedback? At what point do you trust your own creativity, your own genius? That's the first part of that as we move into workshops and seeking feedback.
Well, having both written stuff that other people directed and having been hired to write for a specific story or for other people, commissioned work, it works different ways. I mean, I stopped when I was hired to do this this horror fan film based on Friday the 13th. I turned in my draft. The people who read it liked it, and then I turned it in to the director, who told me to do some rewrites on it. So I did some rewrites on it again. I said, I put in all the rewrites that you wanted, and I said, this is all I'm doing because this is all you're really paying me for. So he took my draft, and then he decided to spend another, I think, 3 months after we read it at the group to rewrite the entire script, which is, he rewrote the entire thing again, his own way. And the film ended up being nothing like what I originally wrote, which is what he originally commissioned, and I took my name off of it. I now only have a story by credit on that. But, I mean, at that point, I was being hired to do a script, and I did all the notes. And when you're working for someone else, you get a lot of notes. And if they want to see all this stuff in the script, I felt it was my responsibility to try and tie it in to the story as much as possible, as well as trying to keep some of my own integrity with the story. Well, by the time he got to, like, draft number 3, you know, he couldn't afford to pay me anymore, so he did his own thing with it, you know. One of my own personal scripts that I had feedback from the Blank Page Screenwriters group is my the Night of the Living Dead fan film I wrote. Now, I specifically went into that group wanting feedback on specific things. There are certain things, the way I wrote the script, because it's an anthology fan film based on Night of the Living Dead. Everyone's seen it, at least I hope you have. The ideal was to make a film that was for the fans. I did not make it for people who did not write or did not like horror films. It was specifically for fans, so if you are a fan, you will pick up on all the subtleties in the script. When it was read by the group members, the people who had never read it or never saw the movie did not get it. And they would give me feedback, and I ignored it because I said, the film is not for people who have never seen the original film. I did pay attention to all the feedback from the people who had seen the film because they got it. And so when they told me to fix something, like Byron, who should be here, but isn't, he would give me great feedback. He said, I need to change this, you should change this, fans will be appreciative of this. Those are the notes I took into consideration. The ones by people who had no clue what I was going for, completely dismiss those. So when I did the rewrites for it, I was like, these are the things that the fans wanted to see. These are what I incorporated. I think I am done now because these 3 or 4 people who gave me great notes fixed the problems I thought I had in the film. The people who gave me like another 70% of the notes that I ignored, threw them out the window. And now I'm done with the script. Hopefully after the film festival we can start shooting it, but that's what it's all about, is getting it to the point where I can go out there and shoot it.
You know, that's one of the things that I think all writers go through is you're afraid of somebody stealing your idea, and, you know, eventually you learn you have to get over that, because if one of the biggest, the worst things you can do is try to go to a meeting with somebody that actually has any kind of power and ask for an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, because that's a huge amateur thing that's going to go off, and they'll probably not cancel the meeting because there's so many, everybody's got their own ideas and everybody's passionate about their idea. Other people aren't usually going to be passionate about your idea. They've got their own ideas. It's hard enough to beat somebody over the head just to get them to look at the idea in the first place to worry about somebody stealing. Now, does stealing happen? Yes, of course, it does happen. But you can't let it inhibit you, because I was leery of I went to American Film Market last fall, and I was actually trying to sell a friend's film, which we knew was a long shot. But I took the one sheet on my screenplay just to see if I could drum up any interest. And I'd send it to somebody, the whole screenplay out to somebody, and that's a little, you know, that's a high pucker factor. You're a little, am I going to see a screenplay about this in the next year or two based on my basic premise? But you can't copyright that. You can't, you know, once it's out in the wild, it's out in the wild. So you just have to go forward with it. But I like the feedback, but as like I say, you have destructive feedback, which doesn't help anything, saying that sucks. Well, that doesn't help the writer. You have constructive feedback, which is, I think it would work better if you did this instead of that, because I didn't understand this. Then you get reconstructive, saying, well, I think you should change the zombies to vampires. And it's like, all right, dude, that's not going to happen. Writers don't take a 90-degree turn because they're doing your version of their movie. My long one, called Origins, is basically Stargate meets Lord of the Rings. Yeah, it's a really big budget. So, but I was telling this woman about it, and she started telling me how she would do it and turning it into Harry Potter. And I'm like, look, if you do this, your movie, you can do it any way you want, but I'm doing my movie this way. So the trick, of course, is what feedback is useful to me. And it's hard. I mean, especially if you go downtown the Atlanta Screenwriters group, scriptwriters group, they're brutal. I mean, they'll just, and sometimes they're insultingly brutal. And I took a screenplay down. I didn't even look at it for 4 or 5 months after I took it down because I was depressed. And you have to go through that process because, you know, people who say they're their own worst critic, guess what? You're wrong. You're not your own worst critic. There are lots of people who are very happy to be very critical of you, more than you would imagine. And, you know, it's
So, okay, good. So how do each of you define constructive criticism as writers? Not as the person giving it, as the person receiving it.
Yeah, I've given a lot of feedback. So one of the things I like to do is, and he knows this, because I have a hard time trying to give someone feedback on reading 30 pages of the script and not having read the whole thing. So a lot of times I wait till I've read the whole thing. My idea is that I need to figure out what the themes of the film are so I can see how they are developed from beginning to end. That's the way I think as a writer. I know a lot of people don't think about themes. For me, themes are extremely important on why I am writing a script. Why am I writing this story? So that is what I look for in other people's scripts. I want to see, why are you writing this story? Are you developing your themes to the best of its ability? And if not, how can I help you to find it? That's one of the things I did with his 280-page epic.
42 or 40.
Yeah, somewhere around there. But my idea was to find what you wanted to tell in your entire story and make sure that you're developing it from beginning to end. So when I'm reading someone else's script, I can't find that in 30 pages. That's one act. you're just setting up your script in the first act. You may just be barely hitting what you're trying to say in the first 30 pages. And if you are a young writer who is not disciplined enough to be able to see it, you may not get to that point till 40 pages in and realize that you don't know what your script is about. So for me, I have to read the whole thing and see, what are you trying to tell the audience with your story? Why are you telling the audience this is your story? If your theme is about one thing, it needs to start off in the first 10 pages. It doesn't have to be overt at all. Most films that you watch in this day and age, it's not overt. It can be a visual motif just at the start. And it develops slowly through each act, through each character, each sub-character, each tertiary character, and those relationships that those people have with the main character. And that's what I do when I'm reading someone else's script, and that's what I hope other people are getting when they read my script. It's like when I'm getting feedback, I'm like, okay, are you picking up on the themes that I'm trying to put in here? Okay, how do I fix those so that they're from the beginning to the end? Are my themes not coming out enough? Are my relationships between the characters not clear? Are they not are they not, complementing my themes? What are the problems that I have with my characters? Most of my films have very few characters. He'll tell you, I don't write films with a lot of characters at all. And so I want to keep all my relationships close at hand so that they are all contributing to the overall story arc that I'm creating.
Well, generally, you have two levels of criticism. You have experienced writers and directors who are giving criticism from a professional viewpoint, and then you have your actors and your other people that are there that are giving it from an audience viewpoint, and you have to understand which is which. An audience viewpoint is just going to tell you, I don't understand what's going on, and that can be very valuable if you think it's clear. The hardest ones and the ones that need to come to a workshop the most are comedies. Because comedy's really hard to write, and it may be funny in your head, it may be funny to you on paper, but there's nothing like watching the face of a writer panic as they read lines and nobody laughs, and they're thinking that was really hilarious. Well, you need to reconsider that, because comedy's hard, don't line comedy's hard, dying's easy.
Now, listen, we need to move to the audience. As I move to the audience, in the workshop, do you use actors as your readers, or do you just use anyone that's interested?
We use actors. We have our writers come in and cast the roles with the actors, and then, one of us reads, I usually read the action. But we try to get actors who are cold reading, and, of course, the downside of that is sometimes you have really bad reads. And people that misinterpret the characters.
You don't use non-disclosure agreements in your workshops?
No.
Oh, never.
No, never.
We wouldn't do it.
Now, the wonderful audience, some of the people who came as we had started, you came later, right? What's your name? Your name? Your name? You look surprised that I asked, huh? Yeah. Okay, so questions, comments from the audience? Free, please. Yes, sir. Tell us again your name. Please stand if you don't mind.
Okay, I'll stand. My name's Pat Peacock. On the notion of the workshops and all that, I live in a small town in South Georgia, so I don't have access to workshops and all that. What are some good options for someone such as myself to get that sort of feedback? Are there online communities? I've looked a little bit, but the internet is overwhelming, and so it's like, what am I looking at? I have no idea if this is a real thing or not. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, nothing really beats getting actors to read your screenplay for you. If you're too far south to come up to Midtown, which is where Atlanta's Scriptwriters Group is, consider starting your own group. I mean, there are actors everywhere around Atlanta. And actually, that's probably a big need, because I don't think there is anything south of the city. But, I mean, you can enter screenplay contests. I'm a little leery of them because, like you say, you don't know if they're just a mill. If they're there, they're paying somebody to read something quickly, give you some feedback, and they're making money. Right. The one I would recommend for feedback was Blue Cat. Yeah. Because their feedback was so on, it pissed me off. It was like, damn it, you're right. So Now I have to go back and rewrite because they were spot on. Others, you know, a professional writer is going to charge you like $250, $300 to do it.
Yeah, but you'll get some valuable feedback. But I would suggest that if you do a service like that, see if you know friends or other writers who have used it before, so you can guide how well the feedback is. Because there's, you know, word of mouth is the best thing about these readers out there who charge you an arm and a leg to read your script. I mean, if you're going to go with one that just give you a one-page write-up of your script, that may not be as valuable as something like yours, which was, how many pages was yours? When he...
It was like 2 or 3 pages. I had one, it was script readers.
Script readers? Okay.
And they were only supposed to give like a page and a half. He gave me like 3 pages. But the problem with them is that he took my plot and then said, well, I think if you did reconstruct it. He tried to put it into Hollywood formula. Take this guy who's not your protagonist and make this guy your protagonist. And it's like, dude, what the... But yeah, I would join the Blank Page Screenwriters Workshop on Facebook because we do share a lot of information online. And, you know, we have 700 members and maybe 20 show up for meetings.
Maybe the reader was expecting you to offer him a job as to rewrite it, huh?
Oh, there you go.
Maybe not that, but we do cast from the actors that come up there a lot of times. They do such a great reading that we cast them a lot.
Cool. How many of you are screenwriters in the audience? Okay. How many of you have a screenplay that you're in the process of rewriting? Okay. All right. Just curious. Okay. Next question, comment? And you, sir, with the glasses, what's your name? You came in later. George? All right. You look familiar, actually. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. My name is Kenneth Braswell, and I'm a new filmmaker. Just finished a short film that's going to air this afternoon, and did a documentary last year that I'm very proud of. But my work is always as a result of my work, and so I do social work, and it is always driven, when you talk about themes, it's always driven by social themes. And so because I'm new to this field of writing and scripting out and trying to figure out whether or not you're doing a documentary or you're trying to tell a story through somebody else's story, and now I just watch documentaries and I watch film and I watch movies in a very different way. I'm watching them for style, I'm watching them for editing. Do you, in your work, watch other similar kinds of films that you're trying to write with the notion of trying to get some ideas but not being influenced? Because what I do is I stop watching the kinds of films that I'm writing about because I don't want to be influenced by what I see. And I don't know if that's an industry struggle or whether other writers struggle with watching other things and not to be influenced.
I have a different background than him since I like to write and I do film reviews and everything else and write a writer's blog and a whole bunch of other stuff that I do. I read a lot of screenplays. I may read, 30, 35 screenplays a year, and those are both from professional produced screenplays and a lot of unproduced screenplays. They're really easy to get out there. You look up free screenplays and you can find thousands of sites out there. I find it much more beneficial to look for the unproduced screenplays. And that is what I use as a guide to figure out structure and to read what other people are writing out there, because the produced screenplays will usually be re-edited for what actually is on the screen. So it will be the cut version of the produced screenplay. It will not usually be the actual draft that they took in and started shooting. Because you'll see in there, when they do that, they'll say, if you read the script, it'll say cut scene. But you never get to read what that scene originally was. I hated that. I hated reading those scripts like that. So I went out and looked for scripts that were unproduced, because those are what the writers originally sent to studios before they got rewritten. And they're so easily accessible in this day and age. And I mean, that's beneficial for me in rewriting, in the rewrite process. I read 35 scripts a year and all different genres. I will not just stick to one genre. I will stick to all different kinds.
You know, one of the things, especially, maybe specifically for you, because we've had this happen in the group several times, you have documentaries which are actual simulation of, you know, what happens, because there's no such thing as reality in film. You make a choice by the camera angle you take, who you're aiming the camera at, and how you edit. So there isn't, unless your camera is running raw all the time and just feeding, you're not getting reality. You're getting some form. You're getting your perception of that reality. And the problem we have with fiction is that based on reality, and we'll have writers come in and they'll say, you know, we're trying to give them feedback. Well, that's not what happened. It's like, dude, it's fiction. The audience doesn't care what really happened. Is it entertaining? Because if you're not entertaining, they're not going to pay attention to it. I don't really look at, I mean, I know my genres, I've watched enough stuff, and like I say, I don't really want to be specifically influenced by anything that may make my stuff look too much like something else. And my muse has no tolerance for it anyway. It's like, I'm going to tell you what to write, shut up. So I try to just get out what it wants me to, and if it looks like, because I've had people, we all do this. Yeah. Somebody says, oh, that's just like this. I'm like, no, it's not. It's because they want to categorize you. They want to put you into a pigeonhole that, what kind of films do you do? And because they're, you know, that makes them easier to deal with.
Also, you know, don't be afraid to, oh, my 1.5 cents, don't be afraid to be influenced, just don't steal. Anyone else? Comment? Yeah, okay. See, yeah, I was coming to you anyway. I'm coming to you too, so think of your question. I'm one of those people, whenever there's a young person in a room, you have to say something.
My name is Judy Knight, and I'm a author, or writing to be an author, creative nonfiction. Right now I'm writing a story about my son, which I hope that he will produce and turn into a screenplay. I'm a part of the Village Writers Group, and I think that I find a lot of value in that. And I was wondering, how do you kind of determine what part of the critique that you take and what part you just throw away? How do you guys determine that? Because I've gotten people saying, okay, restructure it or change chapter 3 to chapter 1 or just all kind of stuff. And I'm trying to just get through the book.
It has to do with your experience, for one. Mm-hmm. Because the more experience you get, the more you can take from criticism and the critique. I mean, we have seen a lot of first-time writers who come in and try and take every note that comes to them. They don't know how to filter it because they're getting a lot of notes and bombarded from all sides, from all these different people in the group, and they're trying to figure out, well, what do I take from this? Well, the first thing is you got to know what you want to say. As a writer, you have to know what you want to say so that when you're getting bombarded with all these different ideals from other people, you know exactly what you can take and what you don't want to take at all. Because without that, if you don't know what your story is about, you don't know what you want to say, you're not going to know how to utilize all that information that you're getting bombarded with. It's just going to be a bunch of noise with no filter.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a little like a painter who's having someone critique their work and add a little umber here, a little orange there. Somebody says, put a big blue stripe. Well, that doesn't fit. It's a matter of what is going to help you refine your story to make it better, to tell the story you want to tell, which is what Kevin was getting at. Because people we're all creative people, and you can't help it. People are going to come up with, well, what if you did that? Well, that's a what if. It's, 90 degrees off your script. Now, there might be some seed in there that might help you a little, but, and I guess that's where having your treatment comes in handy, some kind of written outline of where you want to go. It's like a roadmap. You want to get there. What's the best way to get there without too many diversions? But also keep in mind who's giving the feedback and what their background is. Because if they're just, a reader who has no real experience at it. If it's another writer, maybe pay a little more attention to that. But in the end, make sure it's not diverting your story away from what you want to do.
As I make my way over to you,
she's like, no ideas. You have no questions?
No. Okay, I'll come back to you.
How do I get started in writing? Pick up a paper, pen, and you write about your life first. A lot of your life is actually going to be in your stories. So
Like
that's
it or not, yeah.
like it or not.
Hey, Kevin. I got a question. You know, I write, and I've seen a lot of ads and things for send me your screenplay, and we will critique it for you and charge a fee.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about those services?
Well, we touched upon that just a little bit. Those are very, very valuable services for people who do not have a structure for writing, and for a lot of beginners, because a lot of beginners don't inherently have the right structure to write a screenplay. You can write stream of consciousness, but if you're aware of the structure, that's perfectly fine. If you're not aware of it, it can become a problem, a very big problem, because your script can go off to many different tangents. And the script services, in their basic ideal, a reader will tell you how to get it back to where it should be. Most script reading services, I believe, will almost always try to help you write your screenplay like a Hollywood screenplay. That is designed for you to sell your screenplay. We are not all David Lynch. We can't do the weirdest thing out there and sell it. We don't have a name. If you are a writer trying to sell your screenplay and not produce it, you should be very, very aware of the correct format for a screenplay. You should actually pay attention to what those script readers are telling you, and then therefore you should pay more attention to those type of services. There are some really good services out there. There are some bad services out there. Like I said, there's some people out there who will take your money, $250, and give you a one-page synopsis of your story. You don't want that. You want feedback on how to fix your screenplay. If you are if you're a writer out there trying to do stuff like David Lynch, or I was about to say the dude who wrote Donnie Darko, script service is not going to help you. That reader will tear your stuff apart, and he will think you're writing the weirdest crap out there. It will never sell. Don't waste your money. But if you're trying to write something that will be sold at a Hollywood studio, if you're trying to write, San Andreas Part 2, if you're trying to write, The Avengers Part 3, it's going to be a Hollywood structure. If your script does not follow that structure, it will not get read by a professional or studio. They won't take it. They'll look at it, read the first 10 pages, and say, dude, you haven't set up your main story yet. Chuck it. If you're going to send your script to contests, which a lot of us do, if you don't have that structure in place, 10 pages, it's gone. It's thrown away. There is no reason to waste your $40 entering in a contest if it does not follow the basic structure that Hollywood produces screenplays.
Yeah, the one I'd like to say, I recommend the Blue Cat Screenplay Competition, because it's only like $40. Mm-hmm. You give excellent feedback. There's scriptwriters. I guess I don't know if it's .net or .com, but yeah, the thing is, that's the other reason we push Final Draft, because Final Draft helps force you into the proper format. And here's the thing: if you send a screenplay to be read, professional readers, from what I understand, are paid $50 a screenplay. Mm-hmm. Their out is that if you don't follow the very strict formatting rules that Hollywood wants, they're allowed to say the formatting's not right. So they can read a couple pages, oh, it's formatting screwed up. They won't read your story at all. They're just, your formatting is off, they get their $50, and no one ever looks at your screenplay. So as tedious as it is, you have to absolutely follow the very specific format that screenplays follow. And for God's sakes, use a spell checker, and make sure your grammar is right, and make sure that you didn't put in a word that sounds like another word but actually isn't that word.
That's my Achilles heel.
Yeah, because spell checkers won't find that, because there are no real grammar checkers. Sorry, what?
Is it okay to use dialect when you're trying to write dialogue?
Okay.
Or is that just a waste of...
That's
tricky.
Can
We've
be a
had that
hot
before.
issue. Typically what you do is you say with a thick this Irish accent, a thick this accent. But as a writer, if you want very specific, I want them to go there. Well, if you're saying do it in a thick Haitian accent or something, they're not going to say it exactly like that. Or if you want the actual words to be dim go there, man, then I would think you need to write it exactly that way. Yeah. But keep in mind, and this is the big thing that This is collaborative art. I don't care what you write, the movie's not going to be like that. And it changes every time you're on a set because the actor is going to come up with something, the director is going to come up with something.
We're almost out of time. Oh, I'm sorry. Your question is more important than my commentary. Go ahead.
Hey, my name is Jacob Knight Thomas. And what film or screenplay like influenced your whole style? That was like, what would you say was the most life-changing film in your career? I don't know.
Give me a second, Jackie. I'm in the middle of something. I will say my the screenplay style. I have two people, and they're completely opposites on their style. One is David Cronenberg. David Cronenberg writes a lot of films. Almost everything he directs, he writes. The thing is, he does not like to write action. You read one of his screenplays, it is almost all dialogue, and all the action is what he does on set and in his storyboards. So if you don't read between the lines when you're reading his dialogue, you do not pick up on the subtleties in his films. And it's a brilliant way of writing where there's almost no action and no setup for a lot of things. So if you haven't read any of his screenplays, you should definitely read some of his stuff. The other one would be James Cameron. James Cameron overwrites. The dude he's such a technically advanced director that he overwrites. His screenplay for a 2-hour movie will usually be about 300 pages. I read his original draft for Strange Days. Strange Days, that freaking script was almost 200 pages long. He described everything in that movie, how it worked, what it looked like, everything. Now, as the visual person watching the movie, you just see it. They don't explain a lot of stuff in Strange Days. You see it, and that's how you pick up on everything. But someone trying to direct that screenplay had to have all that in the screenplay. It's a sci-fi film, and I can guarantee you that's exactly how he does Avatar and the rest of his films. Because I've read several of his early screenplays like that, and they're all like that. They're all heavily, with lots of dialogue, lots of explanation. That is not the norm. Those inspire me to write, and they inspire my style of writing, because I don't write a lot of action. I don't, and I expect the actors to try and read between the lines. Sometimes other writers don't get that. I'm fully aware of that. When I get feedback and people aren't picking up on stuff, I fully am aware that some of that could be because they're not reading between the lines. These actors are reading this cold. So so when I'm taking feedback from other people, I have to be very wary of not over-explaining stuff, because Sherwood will know I don't describe a lot of stuff through dialogue at all. You have to visually put that in there. See, not this is a visual medium. You have to show, not tell.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind when you're writing. It's a show, not tell medium. This is not a novel. This is not a short story. This is filmmaking. David Cronenberg, no, everything is visual. The dialogue is everything is between the lines in his dialogue. James Cameron over-explains because he does sci-fi stuff. But it's all visual with him. You read his dialogue, he never talks about all this this technology. It's there. You have to see it. That's how you get to know how it works.
Yeah, instead of, look, there's a flying saucer, you just put in there, they look and they see this very detailed explanation of it. Because if you say, look, there's a flying saucer, and you don't describe anything, you don't know what they're going to actually decide to interpret you. And it's a lot of interpretation.
Okay, listen. Okay, this is the last comment, then we're going to wrap. When Pulp Fiction was released, there was some conversation that Tarantino had actually subverted the formula. Mm-hmm. But then after looking at it, it's like, nah, still three act, beginning, middle, and end. So anyway, everybody, your mind's clear. Any other questions, comments before we close it up? And the reason why I put the young lady on spot is because I believe in, when young people are present, trying to pass on the information, all the knowledge and experience in the room. So it's real important to acknowledge them and try to get them to participate in the process. That's why I did that with the young lady. Thank you. If you don't mind, give yourselves a round of applause, and thank you.
Thank you.